Hi, my name is Joe James. I am here to talk for the Lounge Bar Learning Hub about being a tour manager and artist manager. I think I was chatting to Catherine about this prior. I think I need to talk about quite a lot of the other things that I do and how I got to that place because what I really want to get across talking today is that in the music industry, especially grassroots side of it, you're constantly building a skill set, and that skill set can be uh, anything from creative to organizational. So, I mean, my background, I do a lot of things. I am one third of Radar Festival with Catherine and Ash, Ash who did his talk last weekend, I believe. Um, I have a background from corporate events. I used to be the hospitality and event manager at Guildford Cathedral, where I did sort of £100,000 gala dinners for members of Parliament, mad things like abseils off the top of the cathedral and stuff. Um, I've been a promoter regionally since 2012. I started with two friends, Progressive Promotions, which is now kind of defunct because we put everything into Radar Festival, but um, Progressive Promotions started in 2012 when I decided I was going to put on a band for my now ex-girlfriend's party. I ended up booking Monuments and kind of ran with it from there. And since then I've put on Monuments quite a few times. Uneven Structure, Voyager, Three Track Tigers. We did one of Tosca's first ever shows after seeing them support Heights in Brighton. So yeah, that's been quite fun. That gave me a very good understanding of what you have to do in the background to put a show on. Again, another little piece of the puzzle of how I ended up as a tour and artist manager. Um, as well as that, I worked for the Boiler Room for 5 years. Just left actually. Technically as the event manager, but when you work for a regional music venue, you kind of have to do a little bit of everything. So I was the event manager, I was the in-house designer, I was probably the IT person. I always fixed anything that went wrong, probably quite badly. Um, I worked for Guildfest, a festival in Guildford for 7 years. Started out just volunteering as a steward back when stewards used to get paid. Nowadays it's always voluntary. And then worked my way up, eventually running the stewards and sort of ending up as a kind of site-wide operations. Um, Additionally, from working at Guildfest, I met a friend who ran the stewarding and still does at Green Man Festival. So I've worked for him for the last 7 years. Just general steward management, firefighting, anything that goes wrong. And then currently, relevant to this talk, I am, well, when gigs exist, I'm a tour manager. I am the manager of Hartwick Howard, and I am the social media manager for a performing arts academy, which is a new job which I just got. So it wasn't really a straight path to where I've ended up, but I think I always knew I'd end up somewhere like this. I mean, I was always arty. My dad's a musician, my mother's an artist, and my whole childhood was spent being dragged, kicking and screaming around music festivals. I don't think I probably realised how good that was when you're a child, because that's just what you're used to, isn't it? So every summer was countless music festivals, always at gigs. My dad ran art centres, and so it was kind of normal for me. And went through school and college and the degree process doing art because I was naturally very good at it. Um, without really knowing what I wanted to do, I just sort of went to university because that's what you're supposed to do. And I think sometimes maybe you don't quite know what you want to do at the time. So I did what I was supposed to do. So I went to university, got a graphic design degree, which I've used in every role I've had since, as kind of a bolt on. Uh, but I realised that being sort of a bit of a mix of creative and organised, which is fairly rare because usually creative people aren't super organised. Um, I realised I didn't want to be a graphic designer and wrote to a lot of festivals on my dad's advice. And I spent a summer basically working for free or cost. They would provide accommodation or and feed me and everything. And I was fortunate enough to work for Bath International Music Festival, the Lake District Summer Music Festival, and then just some normal stewarding gigs like Guildfest and a few others. Um, which is fantastic. And if you're looking to start out in the industry, obviously you're coming at it at a position where you probably have no experience. So what you've got to trade on is how keen you are. And the way I got those two jobs was I wrote really, really keen, friendly letters to them, sort of begging for any opportunity, and they took me over that. And actually subsequently, when I've been hiring in positions, there was a case where I was hiring an events assistant and I had two candidates who made it to the last two. There was one who she was flawless, everything she had, but in the interview just didn't really feel like she cared that much. And the other person who interviewed, she didn't have the CV, but you could tell it would mean the world to her and she would put everything into it. So we went with the person that was keener, and we just knew that would give everything. And I think especially starting out, that's the bit of advice that I give to everyone. Being really keen and showing a will to work hard is something that will get you a foot through the door. Actually, someone else I know managed to get a job at Channel 4 by sending a door with a footprint on it saying, "I'm just trying to get my foot in the door," which got her a job eventually working for Jamie Oliver. But I imagine the person at reception receiving this door was probably not too pleased. I mean, Dee just put it with all the other ones. But yeah, getting back on point, just again, these are things that I'm just come back to, being keen, working hard. I think for a while, sometimes you can feel like you're not going to get anywhere, but when when the time passes, these are all things that get added to your skill set. And so I eventually ended up working in front of house at a couple of art centres for Farnham Maltings, and then after moving to Australia for a bit and coming back, South Hill Park in Bracknell. Both really great jobs, but not really what I wanted to do. But it was kind of in the field, it was fun working in theatre, and there's always good, interesting events going on. You are dipping your toes into different things, but being in my early 20s, I probably felt I wasn't really going anywhere. This is funny enough, the time I met people like Catherine and Al, who runs the cellar bar down there, and all the time you're making contact, people who again are on their own journeys and doing their own thing, and at some time later down the line, when you know enough of these people, different projects can come from it, like when Catherine and I decided to start doing Radar Festival. But yeah, so it was a good steady job, but I wasn't particularly mentally challenged by it. So I started doing things in my spare time, which is when I started promoting, and that's what I put everything into on the side. And I probably think for a Guildford promoter, we promoting in gent, prog, whatever you want to call it, probably got as big as we could get. I don't think we could have booked any bigger bands for where we were booking, so I think we always felt a great sense of achievement with that. I mean, there were some hard lessons learned. I remember we just broke even on our first show with Monuments and got a bit cocky, and then our next couple of lineups weren't as strong. And when you lose a lot of your own money, it's a very quick learning experience, and there's nothing like it. And I wouldn't recommend it, but there's nothing that makes you sharpen up your business practices more than, unfortunately, losing money. My worst loss actually wasn't really our fault. It was on the weekend of the worst snow in the UK for about 15 years, and the band from France made it, the band from Czech Republic made it, the band from Glasgow made it, but all of the local audience didn't make it, sadly, and we took a bit of a kicking that day. But that's the trouble being a promoter. At the end of the day, it all rests on you. So if the show doesn't make money, it's the promoter that loses money. The band still need to be paid, the venue still needs to be paid. So yeah, that's the one tip. If you want to get into promoting, I would never book a band that you do not have the capability of paying if everything goes totally south. But as I touched on before, I mean, we did some cool things. It was really great, sort of half discovering Tosca. I can't really claim we discovered them, because Rabia kind of talked me into doing a show with them, but we saw them supporting Heights in Brighton on what must have been one of their first 2 or 3 shows, and then had them straight away supporting Monuments and asked them back as many times as possible until they got too big for us. So that was quite nice to be a bit of a part of their journey. And obviously Catherine and I and Ash were fortunate to have them on Radar last year. If you don't know Tosca, check them out. They're really, really talented 3-piece progressive band, and hopefully we'll have them back at Radar one day. They were supposed to be on next year, I think, but in our many rejigging of the lineup with the COVID changes, I think we may have had them and lost them because of dates. It's been a long year. So yeah, and then still again talking about how on my journey to where I got to, I somehow managed to write the application of my life and got a job in corporate events for Guildford Cathedral. I was probably, being honest, underqualified. I had just enough experience to blag every aspect on the job application, not quite actually tying it all together, and did the interview of my life, got the job. I backed myself because I knew I could do it, to learn everything I could do in time for, so I didn't get fired. And eventually my boss kind of worked it out, and we had a bit of a chat, and she said that she realized what I'd done, but that I had got up to speed, and she respected me for it. So it was a risk. It was definitely a calculated risk, and I had to learn very quickly on the spot, because I went from sort of working in the theatre world and festivals and gigs to high-end corporate events. But as far as I was concerned, all the skills were transferable, which I think I proved in the end. Budgets are still budgets, whether it's a budget for a £300 show or a £100,000 dinner. It's just, everything just scales up. It's still numbers that all have to make sense at the end of the day. And after that, I ended up working at the Boiler Room, which, as I said, gave me lots of more behind the scenes experience in touring acts. I probably at the time had met hundreds of tour managers. Sorry, at the time when I decided to get to tour management, I'd met hundreds of tour managers, and I only remember the great ones and the terrible ones. But the terrible ones definitely outnumbered the good ones. And I was just having a beer one day with Khan, who's the singer of Heart of a Coward and formerly No Consequence. He's a mate of mine, and I was sort of, end of the day having a bit of a whinge about someone I'd probably worked with that day. And I was saying how I felt that I could do a better job than most of the tour managers that I met, and I was considering doing it. And he had just at this time got the job as the singer of Heart of a Coward, and obviously because Khan used to be a tour manager as well, so he knows exactly what it takes to. I mean, he's a far more experienced tour manager than me. He's done huge American tours. So a little anecdote: before we went to Russia last year, the Russian visa process is long and arduous, and probably one of the hardest things I've had to do is fill out visas for a 9-person tour party. And one part of their visa process is they want to know every country you've been to in, I think it was the last 5 years. I could be wrong. It might be more. And so Khan and I mean, mine was difficult. I managed to work it out. But Khan had been to about 120 countries, and they want to know the point of entry date and the point of exit date. And so I had these spreadsheets for every one of the band, working out everywhere everyone's been. And after days and days and days of worrying about it, I went to input it into the document they give you, and it only allows 10 entries. So I made Khan work for an entire evening writing down every single country he'd been to, which was over 120 when he lost count. And in the end, I can only put 10 in, which I felt great about. Terrible and great. It was one of those, one of those moments where you had very conflicting feelings. But yeah, so Khan obviously knew what it takes to be a tour manager, and he did it for a very long time. And he asked if I would like to TM for Harper Coward, which I jumped at the chance of. Again, I think it's just about backing yourself. If you believe you can do something and you're not wholly out of your depth, I think it's worth trying. And obviously I started talking to every tour manager I knew, work out what I needed to do, worked out the process. So first we were just doing a 4-5 day run, UK run. So I did TM. So when you go on tour, there are several jobs that you can do on tour. Usually higher up the musical ladder, you'll have one or maybe multiple people doing each role. When you're more on the grassroots, or you've got an eye on the costings, maybe people will double duty, or maybe the person doing it just wants to earn more money. So there's obviously the tour manager, then driver, often especially around the 300 cap level, 3, 4, 500 cap level, TMs will often drive as well. Then merch, then sound. You get quite a lot of sound engineers who double up as tour managers because they tend to be quite organized people anyway. And then lighting. Then also, you've got your guitar techs, drum techs, etc., etc. I have often done tour managing, driving, and merch. It's quite tiring, and I think again one of the main points to try and get across here is that tour managing is hard work. It's not a party, but it's incredibly fun, especially if you're the type of person that loves organising things. Like, I can't help organising things. I organise my friends when we go on holiday. I organise our flights. I organise the travel. I organise my football team when I wasn't injured, old and injured, I should say. Anything that needs organising, I can't help myself. So if you're the kind of person that can't help themselves organising stuff, then maybe this is a good place for you to go, because it takes a great deal of organising, and I can't tell you how many times I have lost sleep over maybe making one small mistake. So let's say you're on a 10-day tour of Europe. You have to leave the UK. Before you go, you have to advance all of the venues. So you have the band's rider, and in the rider it has everything from how many people are in the tour party and what their responsibilities and roles are. You have all of their dietary requirements. You have your food rider, so what you expect to be fed most shows, which sort of ranges from say a hot meal, usually highlighting things that the band hates and loves. What snacks you want. Ours is usually really healthy. Most of us are vegans or vegetarians, so the only meat eater tends to have to eat quite a lot of veggie stuff. He doesn't mind, and because also when you're traveling for days and days and days on end, you encounter a huge amount of McDonald's, and it gets very depressing. So you just want the healthiest, nicest food you can get your hands on. So we're always asking, yeah, fruit, avocados, anything, vegetables, hummus, stuff that makes you feel a little bit better about yourself that isn't a McDonald's. Then also in that document you have your tech specs. So you advance, all the channels, where basically so that the in-house techs can be as prepared for your arrival as possible. For instance, the headliner may not want to share a drum kit, so you need to tell the promoter that your headline band will not be sharing the drum kit, so they have to accommodate 2 drum kits. Sometimes that could be really difficult in small venues, and if you do not tell them in advance, it can cause a lot of problems. Or you get the what, 2 drum kits conversation? Oh, we don't have any space. And having worked at the boiler room where we don't have a lot of space, 2 drum kits was always a massive problem. I think we did 3 once, when we had, I think it was Monument Heights and someone else, and that was an experience. But again, coming down to organisational skills, you know that these are problems, you plan for it, you get people ready to hoik up the drum kits, you have the other drum kits part built already, you get the sound engineer briefed beforehand so that they know what they're doing. It all comes down to the level of detail, and it's just about ensuring there are no shocks to these people when you arrive at their venues, because there's no easier way to destroy a relationship than coming in having given them no information. I mean, the best crews, I've been in a situation where bands have arrived, we've been surprised massively, and we just make the best of it. We don't complain. It's the job. That the best people don't, but personally I don't like to make people's lives more difficult than they should be. And yeah, so you've advanced ahead. You've got to get back to this fictional 10-day European tour. You have to have booked a van. You probably need a big Mercedes splitter. Let's say that you're TMing and driving and merch for this scenario. So there are many companies where you can hire big Mercedes splitters. They're usually somewhere around £110 a day. You've got to factor in fuel. There's fuel calculations. So I'll make a big tour document beforehand that has each point that you're going through every day. So the day will start. Day 1, you'll start traveling to the Eurotunnel. Then probably, if you're driving a long way, to somewhere in between, hotel, sleep, get up, continue driving, let's say to the other side of Germany. Hopefully your booking agent has routed a very well constructed tour, so you're going from town to town instead of zigzagging, because that's where it gets exhausting and expensive. But most booking agents, they do this for their living every day, and they don't tend to make mistakes of that. Then you get up, head to the venue. Probably, you're talking about another 6-hour drive, trying to stop as minimally as possible, always needing to stop because people need the toilet, everyone's hungry. So you kind of try and plan that, try and find somewhere where you can stop for a good meal on the way. Get to the venue. At that point, hopefully, if it's a good venue, they've got people to help you load in. Sometimes they don't. Load in, set up, sound check. Then there's a lot of waiting around. That's what they don't really show when people glamorize anything backstage. It is everyone sat there on their phones in a room of about 10 people staring at their phones trying to kill some time. If you're lucky, you could be somewhere interesting and you've got a couple of hours, dip out. Like when we're in Berlin, what we always do is we always try and look ahead and find the best coffee shops or the best restaurants that we can find, because most of us are vegan, and the best vegan food tends to actually be really good, so we try and find the best one in a city. If you're tour managing and you're TM, you're driving and merch, you probably don't have as much time as that, because you've got to get there, you've got to get the band set up, sort out any problems that come up. You might have run out of batteries for your wireless packs, or whatever. It could be anything. Your case is going to crack and you have to source a new one. But you also have the merch account, so you get all the merch out. You usually have a day box of what you're going to try and sell that you're taking from your other boxes. Got to count it, got to set it all up, got to make sure you're all set so that the second the doors open, you can be taking money, because tour economics bands really rely on that money that comes from the merch sales. When you are driving around, I mean, it does get expensive really quickly. You'd be surprised. I'd actually quite like to show you a spreadsheet, but I can't really show you any of their stuff. But once you've got it all calculated, everyone's fees, from tour manager to sound engineer, then you've got buying the merch, you've got the diesel, you've got feeding people, etc., etc. It all adds up eventually. Rehearsal spaces beforehand, etc. And it really does we always have a rule when we're costing a tour that we don't want to go out if we're relying on the merch to turn a profit. However, sometimes you maybe want to do a tour that is going to lose you money because you've been offered a tour with a big band and you're the main support. It's going to be a loss leader, but you're going to be in front of big audiences who don't necessarily come to see your band. So you take a calculated risk and you hope you're going to make back a lot of it on merch. Done that a couple of times. It's worked and it's not worked, but everyone's committed. It's a decision you make. But I would say whenever you go and see a band, if you like the merch and you like the band, buy something, because you do not know how much you're helping them. And the reality of the touring industry is most people in the bands they have jobs and they do this as something they love, and you have to get quite far up the chain before the bands actually really start getting paid well. So it's always a labor of love for them. There are people on the tour getting paid, like the tour managers and the sound engineers and stuff, because they are being paid to do a specific job and make the band's life easier. But yeah, quite often the band are just doing it because they love it and it's their thing, and they want people to hear their music and they like playing shows. So definitely bear that in mind when you go see your favorite act, that you could be helping them so much by just buying a hoodie or a t-shirt or anything. And buy something from the venue, because the venues are hard up as well. It's not a good time for the I was going to say UK music scene, but I think globally, European, English, it's going to be very difficult over the next few years after everyone's been shut for a year. Hopefully the majority of venues survive, but when we ran our crowdfunder for Radar Festival, because we took a bit of a hit, I was quite clear in pointing out that you see any venue or anyone asking for help at this time, they're not doing it because they're greedy, they're doing it because they're desperate. No one wants to ask for help. So we're in a country where the government doesn't really help too much with shows. Like in Europe, quite often they have quite a lot of funding. Sometimes venues or tours even can be funded by the government, but in England we don't get that. So and whilst the government did step in and probably saved the industry, I have to give them that. When things are back to normal, just bear that in mind, that the arts industry is always fighting for its life, and everyone there really needs your help. So I'm just going to keep banging that drum while I'm here. Everyone in the industry does it because they love it at the end of the day. That's just what you've got to remember. So getting back to my fictional tour, so it is generally then a case of play the show, pack up, maybe drive for a couple of hours to a hotel, sleep, and repeat, and you do that for 10 days. Or if it's a bigger tour, if the guys are, if you're going out for 30 days or something, you get the odd day off. It's just constant go, go, go. And after a couple of days, you just get in the swing of it. The first day's hard. Everyone loves it though, and Actually, yeah, because it's been so long since everyone's done something like this. We recorded a music video just as the last lockdown ended. I think it was the day it ended, and we all sat in the green room, and everyone felt like we were on tour. It was wonderful, and as I keep saying, it is very hard because I don't want um, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Everyone that does it loves it, and we all just sat there like, oh, this is what we love doing. I can't believe that we haven't done it for so long. Little did we know that now, a further, what's that, 8 months later, 7 months later or something, we're still not doing it, and probably won't be until mid next year. But that is just the cards that have been dealt this time. um, Hopefully things will be back to normal next year. That's what I'm banking on for uh, my mental health. Um, so yeah, you just keep going. Then you've got to get everyone back. That's usually the worst one. So the last day is always super hard, really long travel. I mean, we on our Germany tour, last one, drove back from Munich through France, and then we had to go all the way to Milton Keynes, drop the band back. Having dropped the band back, myself and Khan had to then drive to drop the van back in London, and then get back to Guildford. And I think we got home at 4 o'clock in the morning after leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, I didn't drive the whole way. Con and I alternated through the whole of Europe, and slept where possible, because that's you need to get your rest for it to be safe. But again, come down to I wouldn't change that for the world. And if you offered me the opportunity to do that tomorrow, I would do it immediately. But it is complicated. And going back to what I was saying about sleepless nights, about making a mistake, when you've got 10 consecutive dates with 10 separate hotels with 10 different check-ins, you're doing it all, numbers on a spreadsheet, numbers on a booking page, just that worry about getting there and I've booked the hotel for the wrong day. I've never done it yet. And hopefully I never will, but that just keeps me going back, double, triple, quadruple checking everything I do, because I just could not imagine turning up at a hotel after a solid 16-hour day and it's the wrong day, and everyone looking at you knowing that you've made a mistake. That's my nightmare, really. But I guess also saying that, I mean, I was talking about this to my old boss who runs the boiler room, that I'll say I'm fear driven in a healthy way, but my fear is fear of making a mistake. So that fear drives me to double and triple check things that I do. Thankfully, I only ever seem to make mistakes on things that are salvageable. And I have a rule, it is okay for people to make mistakes, but never make the same mistake twice. Just a good one to bear in mind there. Yeah, and then touring, I guess you could break it down into, you've got UK tours, you've got EU tours, international tours, fly-ins, one-offs. So we did a couple of fly-ins last year where we flew to Slovenia, played, I think it was called Metal Days, which was probably the most beautiful, picturesque festival I've ever been to in Slovenia. Then we were supposed to fly back to Gatwick, sleep in a hotel, and then fly to Ukraine, but our flight got cancelled. So we had to then pay someone to drive us to Venice, where we flew to Gatwick, slept for 2 hours, and then we flew to Ukraine, all pretty delirious, and then did a festival called Fame Minstro, somewhere in the center of Ukraine. And I mean, honestly, it was one of the best weekends of my life. It was actually the weekend before we did the first Radar Festival, and I took that tour because I needed to take my mind off the fact that Ash, Catherine, and I were doing a festival for the first time. And by that point, the festival was organised. There wasn't a lot left to do, and it would have been just worrying. So, yeah, being able to go away and do something quite complicated really helped with that. Another thing I do when I'm stressed, which is actually very helpful, is I do take CBD oil, which keeps me very calm. So I took a lot of CBD oil around that festival. But I don't want to make out like the stress is bad. I think stress just keeps you honest, and I think that people lie if they don't get stressed. Everyone gets stressed, and I think that just shows that you care at the end of the day. So I wouldn't think that's something to put you off. But again, down to the level of the detail, if you're going on the EU tour, things are just about to change. Every single day I'm reading everything that comes across my path about Brexit. Unfortunately, nothing's decided yet, so I am not reading anything that is concrete. But when you cross the border into France, will we have to do a carnet, which is where you have to pay tax on everything that you could possibly sell, give the value of everything you're taking into the country, then you have to sign it off back on the way out. Will it cost money? Will you have to pay for visas? These are all considerations that you have to take into consideration, because if you try and cross border without any of that documents, it's going to go very badly. Russia was a great experience for that, because the Russians are quite terrifying. But again, Russia was one of the best experiences I ever had going to. We did St. Petersburg, and then got what I can only describe as the overground Eurotunnel, because it sort of felt that quality train between St. Petersburg and Moscow. Played shows in both. I can't wait to go back, really. Their crowds are crazy. Especially Heart of a Coward, their audiences tend to be pretty rowdy, but St. Petersburg was off the chart, and we thought nothing would ever top it. And then the next day in Moscow was something else. I lost count of the stage invasions, and there are a little more laps in spectator safety there. So there were a couple of moments where I caught the eye of one of the bands where I was a bit worried about one of the audience, but they sprung back up, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But different culture. And again, it's just either side of it, absolutely tons of traveling. The things you have to think of that you wouldn't normally assume would be something you do, because you just see people turn up at gigs and play. But how does the band get to the airport? Probably going to have to get someone to drive them there in a van. That's going to cost money, going to cost diesel. Got to get the times right for that. What if the flights are delayed? You just constantly think of these things. When you're flying as well, you have to pay for the oversized baggage, because obviously a guitar is bigger than a rucksack, or a case of guitars, or the drummer bringing his snare and cymbals. Then you have the agonizing pain of watching them being loaded onto the aeroplane with the baggage handlers. Even though they say that they are fragile, they don't always treat them that way. Actually, I remember going a long time ago, going to a gig with my dad in Italy, and watching his band's a folk band. They're like the granddaddies of traditional folk music, and most of their instruments are priceless. And watching violins, accordions, saxophones being hoiked onto the baggage ramp, and seeing my dad and his band all wincing, just trying to look away, was a bit of an experience, and that always stayed with me. As well as an old crew boss that I worked for when I was learning, basically saying never touch another person's instrument without permission, because it's usually their life, and if you do move it, be careful like you're holding a baby. So two good bits of advice there. Could crush someone's whole career in a moment. There. So yeah, I mean, what I wanted to get across is it's extremely fun, but it is very hard work, and especially as a tour manager, everything stops with you. You planned it. You're on call the whole time. You need to be the first up. You need to be the last to bed. They're long days, long nights. You need to rest as much as possible. If you can catch 15 minutes on a sofa when there's nothing to do, have a sleep. That doesn't really work for me, but I do make sure I don't stay up any later than I should. Being organised, you can come at it from having been a musician. You can come at it from just being an organised person. You can come at it from having worked from the venue side. These are all different blocks that have transferable skills. I think you just, at the end of the day, have to get on with everyone, because you need to get on with the venue rep. You need to get on with the promoter, you need to get on with the in-house tech crew. They are probably the last people you ever want to piss off. But equally, these people are usually on their best behavior because they want the band to have a good time. So it's sort of a bit of a circle. You do occasionally get difficult people, and it's just finding a way to work with them. I don't think that confrontation and arguments are really worthwhile when you're trying to get a job done. Definitely feel it's worth having a word with them afterwards. I've done that before, but I wait until the show cannot be compromised in any way, and then I'll give them my honest feedback. And shouting doesn't work. You just have to be clear and get your point across, because no one wants to get in a shouting match. Doesn't really achieve anything. Yeah, and then obviously I've just touched upon it. Just running through the points. You have to advance the whole thing. Usually with 10 different promoters. Some will get back to you quicker than others. I've been chasing people up until 2 days before a show before, but the shows that are going to go well, because the good ones get back to you immediately, tell you everything you need to know. The more difficult ones, you're chasing and chasing and chasing. Maybe you're turning up with no information and just hoping for the best. But equally, as a tour manager, you don't really want to pass that stress onto the band. So hold that, and hold that to you. Oh, I've got a question, Ash. What is the worst tour I've worked on and why? I haven't actually done a bad tour. I've only worked with good bands and good crews. I've had bad shows, but I don't really think it's particularly professional to give an example of a person and call them out. But there have been difficult ones. I mean, one of the hardest ones, apart from Russia, was download, because of the levels of advancing you had to go through, from everything from needing the frequencies for your radio packs because they're next to an airport. If you're using on stage walkie-talkies between the sound engineer and the TM, etc. You need to give all those frequencies. You need to make sure everything's fire retardant. You need to give them the certificates. I seem to be advancing it with about 10 different people. It was really difficult, and it was worth it though to watch the guys play in a packed tent in the afternoon to about 8,000 people. You couldn't get anyone else in the tent, and it was an incredibly proud moment to have worked with them, and really great to see them doing so well. Because at the end of the day, my job is just to make sure they get on stage and feel as comfortable as possible to play. Keeping any problems away from them, or dealing with the problems without them seeing it. Don't tell them about it. Maybe if afterwards, if they ask. It's just, you are there to not be seen, and I think that kind of is something that sort of works with the whole event industry. If you're an event manager, or work behind the scenes at a music venue or whatever, the best ones, you don't see them because they're doing their job amazingly, and they're there if you need them, but everything's organized and should just run like clockwork, or able to step in and problem solve pretty quickly. And then I mean, my roles as a TM and then managing the band sort of blur, because there are certain things that the manager would do and then pass to the tour manager. Like, the manager would probably cost the tour, give you a budget to book the hotels. Airbnbs are really good as well if you're on tour and you can find a 9-person Airbnb somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It's often actually cheaper and more comfortable than an Ibis budget hotel. But equally, I mean, I guess you could extend Ash's question there to where's the worst places we've stayed. Sometimes when you've got an eye on costs, we stayed in an Ibis in Bradford, and I've never slept so badly because it was a bit of a bad area, and I was really worried about the van, which I parked really badly so it would be in front of CCTV and all the doors were inaccessible, and probably annoyed a lot of the customers, but it's not worth the van with an entire band's worth of gear, which is their lives, just disappearing. And I was up at 5 a.m. looking out the window to make sure the van was still there. So I've had a few of those. again, you just have to think about these things. Am I parked in full light under a CCTV camera? Does the concierge of the hotel know that I'm worried about the van? Can you speak to them? Can you get them looking out for it overnight? Just think about these things. And then artist management. I mean, I kind of fell into it by accident. Harvard Coward parted ways with their manager, and obviously I'd been tour managing for them for a while, knew the guys, they knew I was organised and hardworking, and they asked if I wanted to do it temporarily, and I guess I'm still there, so I must be doing it all right. But really, it's about doing everything we can to make the band function. So, long-term planning, speaking to our booking agent regularly about offers, judging the offers coming in, pushing back, usually asking for higher fees, which is sort of the dance of the booking agent, the management, and the promoter, which is interesting that I've now been two of those roles, having been the promoter and then the manager. I always think it's funny that we don't just all chat together and go, right, well, what's an honest amount? But you have this little dance where someone offers low, you go back high, and you're going to meet somewhere in the middle, and it works as a promoter, works at every step of the ladder. And additionally, planning tours. Who do we want to go out with? Are we going to do reciprocal tours? Is there a good support tour? Just constantly talking to people, trying to get opportunities, keep the diary good. I mean, at the moment, Harvard Coward are on a writing year, so we're not really doing very much. But it's all planning for the album launch year at the moment. So I can't really go into too much detail about that, but that's all we're thinking about at the moment. Then getting merch done and merch campaigns, trying to make money for the band any way you can, do interesting things, set up interviews, etc., etc. So I think I've probably got about 5 minutes left if there are any questions. I'll just keep talking for a moment on artist management. So yeah, it's again, it's a fun job. It's about being organised, just day to day. My favourite mug, which unfortunately I don't have in front of me, is I love spreadsheets, because that's what I live on. Google Docs is probably one of the best tools you have available. Constantly working on it. It's really good because it's collaborative. Everyone can, you can have 3 people, 3, 5, 10 people typing in a document at once, so everyone can see what you're doing. It's a really good centralized place to organize things, and I spend a lot of time, my head in spreadsheets for everything from Radar, Harvard Coward, my day job, etc. So I don't think there's a particular right way to do things like that. I think you've got to find a way of working that makes you comfortable. But as long as the job gets done, there are no right answers there. Doesn't seem like I've got any questions, so I think I'm going to wrap that up. So thank you for listening to me waffle on and on and on. Please check out Radar Festival, check out Harvard Coward, and thank you very much.